and we hate yellow, so we just changed our color to purple.
Things I don't know how to do well. Edit videos.
The only 06 person on the table. Sorry. You're the only 06 person for that table.
I'm so hyped for Clash. Honestly, 06 is the best. Yeah, that's why they're in 7.
Because they're diverse.
What are you talking about? Do you?
Who's in 7?
06.
Goddamn.
I think. I'm pretty sure 06 is last.
Huh?
I thought we were second to last.
Are you? Because I just checked.
It might have changed. I heard after talent show, so I wasn't sure that we were about to last.
Oh, after talent. Yeah, they put in game show.
I don't know.
Yesterday.
IDK. I don't know how to check.
Just search up Amstud Class. Yeah, 06. 06.
No.
We're 4th, so that's alright. But 05 is right.
Why are we last? What did we do? And what? What other things were there besides the talent show?
Campaign.
Literally everything. Yeah, there's
Call movie. Midday.
cake decorating,
Talent show.
game show.
Call mural.
Well, Mural's gonna get rated. Mural got rated. They need to put in the points. They also need to put the points in for pro picks for t-shirt design, and then there's a half load of stuff.
Diane watched it.
Oh wait, riddles are coming out. Did you guys share your letters
Was it good?
for riddle?
It was pretty bad. It's all 4. So.
I don't know if it's on. Yeah, I didn't get an email.
Wow, why
It's not
did this?
email. Are you? Do you guys have a Facebook page?
Yeah, it's not on there.
It should be the latest.
Maybe we just
Let me know you're here. Are you? Josh? Sierra? Jacqueline?
Here.
Let's zoom in on this thing. Let's see.
Here. Catherine?
Here. I don't know. Let's do it.
Jessica?
Here.
Lucian? Sohail? Here. Alexandra? Eric? Colin? Sybil? Tanmay? Amanda? Here. Eunice?
Did you do the answer homework? You're hilarious.
We can have a thing.
Your shirt, and they dropped one off yesterday, but they didn't tell me today was the day I should be wearing it.
Did you do the answer?
I wore black.
You're hilarious.
But yeah, my name. It's the first time I've had a shirt with my name on it. Yeah.
What? Oh, the girl with the pearl earring?
No, I didn't. I'll wear it next time.
Where tomorrow?
Maybe when I'm cold tomorrow, that guy. When it gets warmer. So your essays are all graded. The grades are make sure that you are going to go each turn it in and press the grade so you see my comments. Those are going to be important not just for the future essays, but you have a revision so it's important that you make sure you know what you did and what I'm looking for, and you make changes going forward. Right?
How do I zoom in? Does this do it?
Exam, again, we can have
Wait, what do you mean by thing?
auditorium. We have today, and
How
we
do I zoom in? Does this do it?
between now and then, there's going to be all Constitution. I have one topic I'm going to cover, and then it's going to be up to you to cover things tomorrow. Yeah, on Wednesday, when you finish, you can go. You don't have to stay there the whole 70 minutes.
What do we need to know about
Again, if you haven't already looked
Let's zoom in on this thing. Let's see.
the exam is the same. Skinner's class ultimately, well, it will all make sense when you take the exam. I I assure you that if you can study with any software.
Or zoom in on this thing. Let's see.
I mean, the variations from semester to semester are not very much. Do you have questions? Okay. No. I am thwarting assassination attempts all the time.
I don't know.
Students put their
Let's do
phones
it.
out, they try to kill me. It hasn't worked yet.
Yeah. Who's going to be the first?
You haven't tried? Yet.
I love this giant team.
But do you love
I
yourself?
love my team. Look at this team. You got everyone on here.
All five.
I love them.
So, students, back to the problems. So the Articles of Confederation had a bunch of problems. The 1780s offered some problems. The other day I mentioned intellectual property, but I didn't mention more about the clause. So we have the copyright clause in the Constitution. Actually, it's not just copyright, it includes patents, trademarks, intellectual property. Here's one day where you should find this. So when we were talking about John Hancock and smuggling, you were like, oh, how cute. All of those pirates. No, I'm serious. Piracy was everywhere. The bookstores and libraries in the early years of the Republic, that is after the Constitution, were almost entirely unauthorized reproductions of British authors. Going into the bathroom really close. One of the stores is filled with basically, pirated books that were printed in some other country. That's what people were reading. It wasn't just the technology and industrial espionage were happening on both sides of the Atlantic. It was quite extensive, which I'll show you momentarily. The early patent applications.
Wait, what do you mean?
Historians who are experts on this
I think.
technology for already existing technology. So people were patenting things that they couldn't actually patent. There was a group called the Society for Establishing Useful Manufacturing. And their goal was to promote from your skillful workmanship in such machines to implement.
Oh my God, what is this? I brought a cow and you brought a pig.
Their entire enterprise was based on piracy.
Oh boy.
And they had support that went all the way up to the president. George Washington backed the textile factory based on piracy. He said he would give it every aid that I can with propriety. Propriety, of course, suggested it's legal, which it wasn't. And in 1789, Samuel Slater, he built a factory that was based entirely on an English one. In other words, he stole.
Oh my God, what is this?
Factory, saw how they put the whole thing together, and then copied it and brought it over. You can't do that. Francis Cabot in 1811, he took notes on factories in Britain, and then he built the exact same ones in Lowell, Massachusetts, and gave us the famous Lowell factories. And if some of you might know the story of the Lowell factory girls, those are the factories that this guy built. Again, based on piracy. So
Oh my God, what is this? I brought a cow and you brought.
What's that? Oh, well, there's a famous in women's history. There's the factories in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Oh my God, what is this?
Girls, and they're essentially sweatshops, and the girls are only working there until they're married and when they leave. The thing is, the girls.
Oh my God, what is this?
During this time, so it raises all kinds of questions. Why? Why does it raise questions?
No, why were they happy?
Why were they happy? Because they felt like they were independent, even though they're being completely exploited. David Brooks, who's the
What is this?
I the New York Times commented something ago, that George Washington used industrial policy, trade policy, and federal research dollars to build a manufacturing economy alongside the agriculture. And the Whig Party used federal dollars to promote a development project called the American System. What he doesn't say here is all of this is Hamilton. The whole thing. Hamilton will be the one who delivers to Washington this big report on manufacturing and urge him to support these policies. The Whigs and the American system that I'm talking about was the congressman or the senator from Kentucky, Henry Clay, who based it on Hamilton. All of this is Hamilton's vision. Actually, I don't want to go on. This raises the question, if there's so much piracy, why is there a clause in the Constitution? To protect who?
To protect the world from
If they know that their own people are pirating things, and that's already going on, like, why do you have the clause in your Constitution?
To prevent like their own people from being pirated.
So you think it's to protect the Americans against the
Yeah,
British?
the Americans can do the piracy.
Oh, it's okay for us, it's just not okay for everyone. Okay. I think that is a perfectly reasonable reading. Well, we have to have the clause there because we have to protect ourselves. There is the international law issue, though, because can you prosecute the British for stealing their stuff? No, you go to war with them. Well, all of this is still going on. I mean, there's a whole lot of technology in East Asia that is, based on piracy. There are patent battles all the time. If you're a tech company, the one thing that you should be expecting is that you're going to be spending a whole lot of time in court. Apple and Microsoft, take any of the tech companies. These people are spending lots and lots of money in the courts, constantly fighting for either their patents or for, well, it's almost always patents, but some aspect of their design. So whether or not how many of you have phones with you? That very design was, it doesn't matter which one you have, the design, the shape of it, and its length and all of that were battled out in court. Because if you make one that looks, the dimensions are too much like another one, or it has rounded corners, all of that has implications for this kind of intellectual property. So these protections exist now, and it seems all very reasonable. But there was a whole lot of piracy going on. So it was one more, but here's the historical context for us. This was yet one more problem that people saw that they couldn't address any other way. That they felt the need for a new constitution that explicitly put it in there in order to address the matter. Because it was so common to have these issues. Now, at this point, I will have you look at my study guide, because apparently some of you have not. And then I will start asking you some questions.
Oh no.
See how many I can remember from this one. So let me ask you about what is the term of a member of the House of Representatives? 2 years. And a member of the House of Representatives, what is the House responsible for that's different from what the Senate is responsible for?
They choose the president if they come to office.
That's true. Rare. What else do they do? What might be they doing? What might they be doing regularly? That's different from the Senate. Well, yeah, that is an issue now. What else? And yes.
Don't they write legislation? The House.
Well, both of them, Senate or House, they can both introduce legislation. There's particular types of legislation that the House is responsible for. But again, both of them need to agree in order to get something passed. They're in charge of the budget. The House controls the budget. They have much more control over the money. What's the term of the senator? 6 years. And what is the Senate responsible for that is different from the House?
State rights.
No. There are two things in particular.
Don't they have to back up the Supreme Court decisions?
They
Oh
vote
my
on
God,
Susan
what
B.
is
Supreme
this?
Court.
I brought a
The
couch.
House has nothing to do with appointments to the Supreme Court. And a similar responsibility, and again, the Senate does it. But it's not the Supreme Court, it's something else. Clearly, all of you living in the Amstud bubble, not paying attention to present
They
issues.
have to live.
Do they deal with like laws and stuff?
Again, both chambers, in order to pass a law, the bill has to go through both chambers.
Confirmation.
They confirm the appointments that the president makes to the executive branch. So the Senate confirms suggestions for the Supreme Court. They also confirm whoever the president may want to actually be the head of a cabinet position. When Alexander Hamilton is chosen by George Washington to be the head of the Secretary of Treasury, the Senate has to confirm it. I'm going to tell you something about a peculiarity of the 19th century. Elections are in November, in even-numbered years. Okay?
You brought a thing.
This period before, when a person is elected, but so your new congressman, they've been elected, but they haven't taken office yet. That period is called the lame duck period. That's the phrase we use. So the lame duck, right? So now we had election in November. There was a lame duck Congress, and then the new people were sworn in at the end of January. There were like 2 months of lame duck. Okay, lame.
Wait, is lame duck the Congress that is already in, or is it going to be a replacement?
The one that's going to be replaced. The lame duck Congress is the one that's being replaced. Here's the peculiarity of the 19th century. The election was in November, but the new people who were elected, because of the difficulties of transportation, didn't take office until the following December. That's a 13-month lame duck period between the election and when they take office. When we watch the Lincoln movie in a few weeks, there will be a point when they actually refer to the new congressman coming in office in December. They were the people who were elected the following November. That also means you have these people who were voted out of office. They're in office for a long time. But the new president is in office every 4 years. So you have a period in which you have a brand new president, but the president is working with the old Congress. Here's my question. What does the Constitution tell us about this? What does the Constitution tell us about the timing of things?
was a amendment that reduced the amount of time that you could be a lame duck from 13 months to 2 months.
What amendment is that?
Which money?
So they actually change it in the Constitution. And when is that?
1933.
So into the 20th century. But here's another question. Did that actually nullify something that was in the Constitution? The place to look, by the way, is the Senate version. If you look to the Senate website of the U.S. Senate, they have the Constitution there, and it's annotated, and it will actually explain those things in the right-hand column. What does Article 1 say? Yeah. I suggested going to searching for U.S. Constitution Senate and going to the USSenate.gov page, which has a copy of the Constitution. So you're here.
And like it says that they have to meet, and they have to meet like the first Monday of December. That's the time.
Right.
So like yeah, when they first meet, and then really not have to do anything.
But it didn't say which December. And so it's like 13 months later in December until the 20th Amendment, which says, no, 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 no. That's not right. Now it's going to be much earlier. But some of so that decision to do it like that, there are lots of things that we do which would be called political norms. They're extra constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution about them. They're simply the way we've been doing business. The British Parliament, as you know, doesn't have a written constitution. They've been doing business this way for centuries. How do they get by without a written constitution? Political norms. The understanding is that Parliament is made up of a bunch of gentlemen, and that they will all be gentlemen and get along. Until someone comes along and decides, oh, political norms, we don't need them. And then it's a problem. But, so this was a political norm, and by constitutional amendment, they decided it wasn't going to be done this way. So speaking of political norms, what's this? Yes? Why don't I go to Eden, since I haven't heard from you?
It's when you like stand up and talk about something for a really long period of time, trying to convince the Senate.
And what does the Constitution say about filibusters?
Nothing. Less than my mother.
Alex, you can do Control F. Tell me what it says about filibusters. Nothing. So how in the world do we end up with that? What happens when you have a filibuster and somebody, as you say, gets up and talks at length? Then what? Yeah, but the rules are such that the person has the floor, and they have the floor until they stop speaking. What you'll find is, if you look up this, the Senate has something called cloture. They don't even track it as filibuster. They track it as there's ever something like not measures of culture. It's what's it? No, they don't even call it convulsing. The Senate uses a specific term, but anyway, they take a vote on cloture, which brings an end to a filibuster. If you look online for this, I think again it's at the U.S. Senate website. They actually tell you the number of times in history that these measures to vote on cloture have actually been done. Does the Constitution say anything about cloture? No. So this is, again, a political norm, not something that's actually in there, but it's something that we have. And the parties themselves have made these rules for their chambers. So in the Senate, they changed the rule a few years ago. The Democrats still had the majority, and they were finding that anything that they wanted to do, the Republicans were filibustering. And when they filibuster, you needed a 2/3 vote in order to shut down the filibuster. And it was really difficult for the Democrats to come up with a 2/3 vote, therefore there was a lot of opposition. So they said, look, we're warning you, if this persists, we're going to have to change the rules of the chamber. So they did. And they got rid of, they basically banned the filibuster by making it possible to pass things with a simple majority. They were able to get legislation passed and that this is everything except for Supreme Court nominations. The Supreme Court, you can still filibuster a Supreme Court nomination, which is, if you've been following the news, probably going to happen in the next 6 weeks. It's usually. What's that? Well, it's their chance. So the way the rules are.
They just like sit there.
No, there's kind of a pecking order, and then it's this person's turn to speak, and they simply do not give up the floor. They refuse to give up their right to speak in the chamber.
They just keep talking.
And just keep going.
About the topic or
Whatever.
they don't talk about.
Yes. And they do that at great length. What's that? Yes. And if you look at the Senate website, the number of motions cloture, they've reached an all-time high. We've never had this many. Yes. So they changed the rules. So everything except for Supreme Court nominations, which don't come around very often, right? That's the only thing that now where you can actually filibuster. Everything else is a simple majority. Then the Democrats found themselves as the minority party, but they'd already changed the rules. And the Republicans said, well, we're not going to change the rules. We're going to keep them exactly how they are. However, the Republicans are now the majority party, and they have said that they may change the rules again to make it apply to Supreme Court justices too. Again, this is kind of political brinksmanship when it comes out of the norm. It's has nothing to do with the Constitution. What's the question?
Because I mean, this is pretty self-much BS. Like, I mean, why would they do that just to prevent the function of the government? Just it's kind of dumb if they're doing it just for their political ideas.
But this is what was happening. So the last 3 Congresses have done less than all of the previous Congresses going all the way back to the 1930s.
So why not only let them meet like once a week?
Well, I was talking to my seniors about this morning. If you don't make them work, they spend all of their time fundraising. So it's a matter of philosophy, right? So if you're okay with the government doing nothing, then You just send them out to fundraising. If you want the government to actually do stuff, and if you want the people to actually be having debates and dealing with this stuff, and like, as you say, doing their jobs, then you schedule it. It turns out that the leaders of the parties in those chambers, Senate or House, they actually structure the time too. And so they can actually say, no, we're working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week. Do you want to do fundraising? You do it on your own time. They could do that, but they don't. And so they tended to use almost half of their time during the work week getting on the phone, calling people, and asking for money.
What do they do now? What time are they working? Just like normal 40-hour week?
No, so they have several days during the week where they're not actually in the chamber. Like Mondays, there's no session. Monday is a fundraising day. Or at least it was, I don't know at this moment. But Mondays, everyone, instead of going to work, they go into their office and they're making phone calls to donors asking for money. And Tuesday they have meetings, probably committees. Wednesday, fundraising day. Thursday, meeting of the whole chamber. Friday, partial session. You know, and so that's how the week ends up being structured. So if you want them to do stuff, you have to schedule them to do stuff. And if you don't make them do stuff, they'll spend all their time raising money.
So for the political norms thing, is there still like rules that they have to follow? Because like you said in Parliament, if there's no constitution and you just accept from off the gentleman, so like technically.
Yeah, so you can have within the political. When I say political norms, I'm talking about actually a number of things that are extra constitutional. When I say extra constitutional, it means it's not in the Constitution. Filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's a political norm. But you can have rules that shape its usage, as I was just explaining. So there are rules that apply, but the rules can be changed. But they're also not necessarily tied to the Constitution.
Why would they allow filibusters on any certain proposals?
Well, they used to allow it on anything.
But why would they just limit it to a few if they didn't? If they don't like it.
They decided that the Supreme Court decisions were one place where they have not been willing to just go by a simple majority. They want it to be overwhelming. Anyone in the chamber, yeah. Okay, let me ask you about. There was something else. Somebody. Never mind. I'll just go to my computer. So. Oh. Tell me about the veto. It actually ties in with some of this here. Tell me about the veto. Oh, there's a difference? What's the difference between a veto and a pocket veto? But what would be the point of doing that?
Really directly oppose the legislation just
Okay, you know, that seems just like, you know, an instant student thing. I don't feel like doing this now. If I just keep putting it off, it'll go away.
But it works here.
Yeah, it works here because they expire.
But there must be some other purpose.
Peer pressure.
His
Legacy? The original point of the pocket veto had to do with timing. So if the Congress passed something at the end of a session, it would then go to the president, and the president's term doesn't have an end of the session until, you know, the end of the term. And because it was scheduled, it was possible for the president to just say, I'm not going to do anything, and then it will expire, and then it will be pocket vetoed, and the Congress will not be able to come back to override my veto. So the original point of the pocket veto was that because of the timing, it couldn't be overridden. Now, these are relatively rare, especially now, given how the timing of these things are. There was discussion in my morning class, because I actually asked them to look it up, and I still didn't get a definitive answer because there seems to be disagreement about pocket vetoes and when they were used. At least that's what students were finding. The last one I remember was one that was done by Richard Nixon in the 1970s. I do remember something about Barack Obama attempting one, and then some student this morning said, oh, apparently President Bush was claiming that he pocket vetoed something. And then some other student found that it wasn't actually a pocket veto, so I don't know what that means. These things are relatively rare, and the original point is that it had to do with the timing, and it was impossible to override a pocket veto. So, in other words, it sticks. And the rules of the chamber are such that if you wanted to reintroduce the bill, you would have to do it again the next session. And then, of course, it gets harder once you've actually been through that process. Let's see. There sure are a lot of checks and balances there. What does the Constitution actually tell us that the Supreme Court can do? According to the Constitution, what are the powers of the Supreme Court? Yes, I took it.
Can't they decide if something is considered like unconstitutional?
Okay, what does the Constitution tell us?
They can declare any law, federal or state, unconstitutional.
What does the Constitution say?
It says that
the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Which is like what Congress says.
and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish.
It's just that I'm not hearing anything about being able to like declare things unconstitutional. I don't hear that.
Well, it says that the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, which means that they can they have like the final decision law, or like they can originate their own decision.
Do I see another hand, Sarah?
The judicial power falls into all cases in law liberty arising with the Constitution and the laws of the United States.
Here's the thing. In the early years of the Supreme Court, the worst job in the federal government was definitely not Hamilton's Treasury Department. You had 7 other co-workers. It was great. The worst job that you could have was actually the Supreme Court justice, because in the early years, no one actually did the political norm. The understanding was that the Supreme Court justices would be writing as circuit court judges most of the time. And then when the Supreme Court needed to meet, they would all get together and meet in basically a closet space in the House of Representatives, and they would have a meeting. The Supreme Court was so unimportant to the other 2 branches of government that they gave them a large closet and said, here, you can meet here. When you're here and you're not busy riding on the circuits, riding on the circuits meant they were on horseback, riding around in all manner of weather, living in hotels. This is like the lifestyle of an indie rock star. Like, who wants to do that for any length of time? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? I don't know how many Supreme Court justices played guitar.
How many were, do they call like a full band?
Yeah, I wonder what they'd be called.
There's
9, yes. It's a small jazz outfit called the Dead White Dudes. Yes.
But there's no like age restriction to being a Supreme Court justice, right? So if you just be like college.
In theory, this never happened. It was a miserable existence, and the result was that the people were leaving all the time. Again, the assumption is, well, these people aren't going to be on the Supreme Court very long, so if they have a lifetime appointment, who's going to stick around if that's the lifestyle that they have? So they don't. That means that the presidents then have all kinds of abilities to appoint people all the time. And so in the early years of the Republic, we went through the Washington presidency, and then we're going to have John Adams. John Adams has the chance to basically appoint all of his own Federalists because now there's a party system, and he's like, I'm going to choose a Federalist to be on the Supreme Court. And so one of the things that happens, I mentioned this, and we're not going to go into great detail, but I mentioned to you that John Adams is going to attempt to, well, not him per se, but his party, the Federalists, are going to attempt to basically stifle all dissent. Like, if you're critical of the president or the Federalist policies, you can be arrested and thrown in jail. So they're going to arrest a bunch of journalists. They did. They actually did this. And the question you should be asking is, and where was the Supreme Court in all of this? Isn't there a First Amendment? And the answer is, well, they were all Federalists. Oh. They thought this was just like, we're Federalists, President's Federalists, we're Federalists, you know, we don't care. They didn't do anything. And anyway, we're busy riding around on circuit court. So here's what happens. Eventually there's going to be this, boy, is that a bad Maybe you've heard of this case, maybe not. Marbury v. Madison. Now, if you actually read this case, it's incredibly boring. If any of you are ever actually having trouble sleeping on campus, open up Marbury v. Madison. Okay? I promise it will put you to sleep by the third line. Okay? It is the most boring thing you can possibly imagine. The details are this, okay? But it happened at the end of Jefferson's term. He wasn't actually confirmed until Madison was already in office, at which point you have basically a lame duck. Senate says, oh, sure, we can put him in. And Madison says, no, I wouldn't have picked the guy. And so he fires him. So Marbury sues. And the case ends up at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has to decide, you know, should the guy get an appointment. Okay, it's incredibly boring. But here's the really interesting part.
How much did you get?
Out of the...
You don't have a life sentence.
I have no idea. Out of that case, okay, out of that case, we get something that has nothing to do with the case. We get the Supreme Court deciding, that as it looks at the Constitution, that it has the right for judicial review. Judicial review is the right of the Supreme Court, or is the, not right, the power of the Supreme Court to review the policies of the other two branches. In other words, they decide that their position is to be a check on the other two branches and to be the third pillar in the kind of balance of power. But the Constitution, as you just told me, doesn't say that it has this right.
I love the Constitution.
You said right, and then you said power. What's that?
So when we're talking about the Bill of Rights, rights are reserved for individuals to do certain things. Actually, no, that term would be liberty. Rights are usually referred to as a freedom that you have in which the government will defend it for you.
Which part?
So, okay. You know what? This is not going to be on the exam, so pay attention. No, seriously, it's not going to be on the exam, but I'm explaining it to answering the question. Okay. I said power. I have to be careful. It's not about right. Judicial review is a power that the Supreme Court is deciding that it has from the Constitution. When John Locke is talking about natural rights, what he really meant is liberties. That's how we use the term now. That you have the liberty to do things unhindered. A right, the way we use this now, a right is something that the government will protect for you.
Shouldn't the government protect your liberty though?
Well, yes. I mean, so when we say the Bill of Rights, what we actually have is a Bill of Rights and Liberties. Because some of the things in there are liberties. They're reserved for you. But some of them are rights that the government will defend. So free speech, for example, is a liberty, not a right. You have the liberty of free speech. Well, we always say right, and we use them interchangeably, but if we wanted to be philosophical about it, we would actually say, no, what we have is supposed to be a liberty that's unhindered by the government.
So should we say for rights and justice for all?
But then shouldn't the government defend your liberties as well?
And your powers?
No, the difference is, for instance, like civil rights, for example. Civil rights are something that the government will intervene in order to protect the individual. A liberty is something that you have where the government can't come near you.
If someone else is invading on your liberties, won't government?
This is what you get for asking the question. when I say power, what I'm saying is that when we say separation of powers, the reason I said powers is the Supreme Court is claiming for itself this power. If you don't use the word power, if there's a question on the exam or you're making reference to judicial review and you don't say power, I will forgive you. It's not a big deal. But what we're talking about is the Supreme Court claiming a power for itself, because the Constitution itself doesn't state this. It doesn't use this term.
So was it Madison's power, right, or liberty to fire?
He would be claiming that he has the power.
The power, but it's also his right as the.
Again, we use these things interchangeably. I would tend to see freedoms as maybe being a generic version of both of these. Liberties as something specific that keeps the government away from you, and rights as something that the government will defend for. Again, more information than you needed, but it's because Alex had to go and ask an intelligent question.
So, initially the Constitution didn't say that the judicial branch was the third pillar.
Well, it does. I mean, it's there. We have an article devoted to the Supreme Court. In the Federalist Papers, and I think it's number 71, Hamilton actually hints at this idea of judicial review. He doesn't use the phrase. He uses a different phrase, but he does suggest that the Supreme Court would be this kind of final arbiter. It's actually something that drove the Anti-Federalists crazy. There are several papers where the Anti-Federalists are actually complaining about the court. They're like, wow, these people are going to be way too powerful, and we're worried about that. And some of those Anti-Federalists, if they lived long enough to actually see the Marbury versus Madison case, were probably thinking, oh, geez, this is what we warned you about. But in a sense, the Supreme Court, which had always been weaker than the other two branches, with judicial review, now suddenly becomes actually an equal player to the other two, and really does, in fact, have
But just that they didn't.
Well, they needed to do. They must have had some kind of power, and the question ultimately from legal theory was, if Marbury has a point, who's going to defend his right? This is how they arrived at this. They're like, well, there's an actual case here, but we don't know how to explain it. And the only way to explain how it is that we can even make the decision is that the Supreme Court has this power of judicial review in order to even make a decision on this. That's how they arrive at this. But once they do it, every Supreme Court since then rests on the foundation of Marbury versus Class. No, that's just the quantitative easy.
So the judicial branch just claimed that they had this right, and they just even though other people said it wasn't.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree that that's what the Supreme Court should have been doing. After all, I told you what happens if the Supreme Court does nothing is you have a case like with John Adams where he is basically making it illegal to criticize, and you have a Supreme Court that says, well, it's beyond us, we're not getting paid to do that, and the Constitution doesn't tell us we have any kind of power at all, so we're not going to say anything. It's only with this that the Supreme Court realizes that it does in fact have a power. And I don't think that there's anyone around today who would say that we think the Supreme Court should not have this particular power. Which, yes, it articulated for itself, but I mean, the executive branch has grown and grown and grown. And that's something it did more or less on its own. Although with the agreement of the other two branches, the Supreme Court has allowed the executive branch to get big. The Congress has funded the executive branch to get big. The Supreme Court, in recent years, has actually pushed back and said the executive, it can be big, but that doesn't mean it gets the power to do whatever it wants. And so they pushed back on that power. But this could have been challenged. I mean, you could have had a Congress that said, sorry, you don't get judicial review, and by the way, we're so intimidated by it, we're going to have a constitutional amendment and make sure that they don't do that.
So, why didn't they make with it?
Well, because once they claim it, it's unnecessary. And we could say, going back to my original term, it becomes a political norm. Actually, it becomes part of the precedent and the foundation for how the court system works. Now that they adopt from the British, this idea of precedent and so on, that comes from common law.
So then, if President Trump and his Republican Congress really wanted to stop the federal judges from blocking his executive orders, could he have the Congress try and take away judicial review and then
That's an interesting scenario. In theory, yes, they can do that. What's more likely to happen is that they'll simply fight judges. That they'll want to appoint judges that they like, who will give the decisions that they want, in the hope that they won't. So, for instance, this guy Gorsuch, who, where are we on time? This guy Gorsuch that President Trump has chosen to be the Supreme Court pick. An interesting thing about this guy, I don't know if you know this, his mother was the first head of the Environmental Protection Agency.
The
EPA. Yeah. So his mother was the first head of that agency. And then she actually came back and headed it again a second time. Now that's really interesting if you know anything about this guy's politics, because he's very conservative, but here his mother was the first head of the EPA, an agency that the Trump administration would like to actually get rid of. In fact, they're filling it with people who don't even believe climate change is real, including the current head of the EPA and the people that he's picking, okay? One of the questions people are asking is, since Gorsuch has this rating on from various organizations, is he somebody who's independent-minded enough that he would join the rest of the Supreme Court? I mean, I don't think there's actually much, even if Gorsuch is somebody who says, you know what, Trump can do whatever he wants. Even if he were to do that, he would be a minority vote on the Supreme Court. The other 8 justices, and we're talking about left and right, The conservatives and the liberals on the Supreme Court have all been in agreement that there are things that the executive branch simply cannot do. And they've been pushing back on executive power. Now, Trump hasn't been in office long enough for some of his decisions to make their way to the Supreme Court eventually. But so, if they wanted to go in that direction, if that was like kind of all-out war that's been declared, it's going to be very long. And the way our political machinery works, it's intentionally really hard to do that because you have judges who are already there. They're there for life. And they're not likely to make the headway they want. I mean, it's one of the reasons getting a single judge on the Supreme Court is a big deal. But the fact is, even if Gorsuch were to endorse everything Trump does, the other 8 may not. And so I think that scenario is very far-fetched. So tomorrow when I see you, you are running the class for the next 2 days. Okay? You should come with questions. You should try to figure out how you tackle this exam. And that's going to require, among other things, that you are reading the Constitution and asking me questions. I would love it if someone asked me about emoluments.
Isn't that like, that never
it turns out that the term was used a lot in the early 19th century.
Jacqueline, do you have a charger?
We've never had somebody.
Oh no. Amanda, do you have a charger?
All right, I will see you tomorrow.
Not if I kill myself first. Guess what, guys? Chamomile tea is gross.
Look at that.
Shimla, shimla.
You're gonna come to the shady hallway?
Oh yeah, very cool. But let's drop off our stuff first. Don't fucking play with me. Yeah, I'm not in the mood. And just saw some kid's face get smashed and bloodied like it just came out blue. His power structures are not recapitulating much better than me because of your job. You're cleaning toilet bowls and pissy, shitty, sticky boxes. Except you're no boss, you're a slave. Just want us to believe that some of us are greater than we are. It's just distracting. It's from the fact that we're all lower than humans as of society. Da-da, like yesterday. Da-da, 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 lies are like with the shame Uh-oh. The stream's still on.
It's awesome. It's like D&D.